Okay, today we are going to discuss what is really going on in the book of Genesis. Like I said before, this is the biggest horror story ever told. This is worse than any Stephen King novel that I've ever read. And I'm going to break it down and show you what it's really about and how it discusses the generations of a satanic human sacrifice cult. And it takes place when this cult was expanding through the Middle East and Egypt. And what this cult does is take over. It destroys all opposition and then pulls in anyone who will be good cult members or slaves. And at the head of the cult is a shadowy group of priests who in Genesis are called the Lord. And once you understand that, you will understand the Old Testament. And you will understand the book of Genesis. So you have this shadowy group of lords acting as if they are God because they are wielding the power of demonic alien beings. So when you hear what is supposedly God talking, and he says, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness," and later on you hear, "Behold, man has become like one of us, knowing good from evil," and then later after that you hear God saying, "Come, let us go down and confuse their language." This is obviously not God talking. It is the head priests talking. So, for example, when the Lord is quoted as saying, "Come, let us make man in our image, after our likeness," they don't mean, "Come, let us make people. Let us create humans." What they mean is they want to take regular people and change them into something that looks and acts more like them. That looks and acts more like cult members. So then they are no longer free men and women, but they are demon-possessed zombies who will do whatever they are told by the cult. So the first story in Genesis is Adam and Eve, who are not the first people created by God. They were actually the first story of a man and a woman who got out of the cult and away from the control of the priesthood, which controlled a place called Eden. So in Eden, the sign of this priesthood was the snake. And opposite to that, the sign of God, or those acting as the power of the one true God, were Adam and Eve. So this coven of priests secretly worshiped demons, and they kept most people in the land of Eden ignorant of this. They kept most people in the land of Eden ignorant to their source of power. So the people who lived and worked in Eden looked upon the head priests as the lords of Eden. These quote-unquote lords of Eden were the wisest. They had the power and control. They were the governing class. And that is why the people of Eden called these priests the Lord. Yet the priesthood was evil, and they manipulated, they abused, and they killed the people of Eden. And they even told the people of Eden a bunch of stupid lies. And the people believed the lies. And one of the greatest lies the priesthood told the people of Eden was that the beautiful fruit called apples were actually poisonous. So you couldn't eat the apples from the apple tree because it was a poisonous fruit and it would kill you. And since the people of Eden looked up to and they believed the priesthood, they didn't eat the apples. So the apple tree symbolized not only the people's ignorance, but this apple tree symbolized the cult's control over the people who believed whatever the priesthood told them. So the people were kept in a state of ignorance Not only about this coven of witches called the Lords of Eden, yet also about the knowledge of good and evil. In other words, nobody knew that the priests and the nuns were very evil people. They had no knowledge of good and evil. So there were these two very smart people who lived in Eden named Adam and Eve. So Eve was looking at the apple tree one day and she said, I'm going to do a little experiment. And I'm going to really check out this horrible poisonous fruit that the Lords tell us is poisonous and will kill us if we eat it. So she picks an apple and she cuts it open and she smells it. And it smells pretty good. And she puts a little piece to her tongue and she tastes it. And she finds it sweet and that it tastes pretty good. So she decides to eat a little bit of the apple and finds that it actually tastes delicious. And after so long, it doesn't kill her. So she eats the whole apple and she feels great about it. So when Adam comes home from work, she says, Adam, you know that fruit that the Lords tell us is poisonous? You know, I tried one today and it did not kill me. And in fact, it's the most delicious fruit that I've ever tasted. So after Adam gets over his initial shock, he says, okay, give me one then. And he tries the apple, and he loves the apple, and he eats a bunch more and says, you were right, Eve. The Lords are a bunch of lying, degenerate assholes. So Adam and Eve start thinking about what else the Lords of Eden could be lying to the people about. So Adam and Eve decide to spy on the Lords of Eden one night and saw what else these so-called lords were up to, besides lying and cheating everyone else in the land of Eden. And they saw exactly what the Lords of Eden were doing, which is hurting, killing, and enslaving the people of Eden. And they felt such disgust and shame for the false Lords of Eden. From that point forward, they avoided these priests whenever these fat, disgusting piles of shit walked through the garden. They would hide themselves from these Lords of Eden. But as for the ignorant people of Eden, they would run up to these priests and nuns to ask for blessings and have a little small talk or ask for advice. But Adam and Eve hated the shameful and disgusting lot of priests and refused to go before them. And the Lords of Eden saw that Adam and Eve were no longer ignorant. And they knew the Lords of Eden were evil. And so these Lords of Eden began to attack Adam and Eve. And these coven of priests said to each other, Adam and Eve already know that we are evil. We better chase them out of here before, one, they start telling any others, and people begin to witness not only the tree of knowledge, but also begin to realize what is called the tree of life. And this is also known as the flower of life, which I will tell you about later. So Adam and Eve warned all their friends and said, hey, you better get out of here too. Then they took their families and they left Eden. So Adam and Eve got out and they took their families with them. Now the next story in the Bible talks about Cain and Abel. And these were two brothers who did not get out of Eden because they are still under the control of the Lords of Eden. Yet the Bible will tell you that Cain and Abel, they had to be Adam and Eve's children because God could only create two people at the start. Yet we should all know by now that when the true God created people, millions of people were created all at once, all over the world, not just two. So the story of Cain and Abel picks up next in Genesis. And the story of Cain and Abel exposes the type of mind control games the satanic priesthood likes to play with its ignorant subjects. So Cain and Abel were two brothers, Abel was a sheep herder, and Cain was a tiller of the ground, which meant he farmed grain. So when it became tax time, and everyone lined up to give the lords their offerings, the Lord saw Cain. And the lords of Eden, the priesthood of Eden, said, "We like the look of this Cain. He looks tough, mean, and we want to see if he has what it takes to move up in Eden and to become a made guy in the cult. So let's mess with him a little bit." So Cain and his brother Abel showed up to pay the lords of Eden at tax time. And the lords expressed great pleasure with Abel's offering of sheep. Yet next in line, Cain had a few wagons of grain, and the priesthood turned up their noses at Cain's gift. It was nothing compared to the great gift of his brother. So by their actions, by their attitude, the priesthood set Cain against his brother. And so Cain went before one of these priests and expressed sadness that his offering was not as good as his brother's. "Grain is all I have to offer because this is what I produce," he tried to explain to the priesthood. So the priest responded, "So what else do you have that you can offer us?" And Cain says, "Well, not much, because it's just me and my brother at our estate." "Just you and your brother, huh?" said the satanic priest with a grin. So Cain went home and contemplated what the priest had meant, and realized that the cult wanted him to offer them his brother as a sacrifice. So Cain called Abel into the field, and then he killed his brother, and then burnt his brother's body as an offering to the lords of Eden to win their approval. Now the Bible has a lot of double talk, especially when it comes down to the lords of Eden. They often say one thing and mean another. So after Cain kills his brother to please the lords are said to be angry with Cain, and they punish him. But if you read the Bible very carefully, the lords of Eden actually reward Cain. So the lords say, "You will not be a tiller of the ground anymore. You will be forced to leave Eden and become a wanderer." So Cain says, "If I am forced out of Eden, whoever finds me out there will kill me." But the lords of Eden say, "No, because we will give you our mark, the mark of Cain." And the mark of Cain says that if anyone tries to harm a single hair on your precious head, we will hurt them 7 times worse. So Cain's actions not only seem to have pleased the lords of Eden, but now Cain is a made guy, under their protection wherever he goes. And the coven of witches, the cult of priests, had big plans for Cain. And Cain ended up leaving Eden and marrying an unidentified woman who was obviously very rich, because with this woman, Cain builds a city that he calls Enoch. So these cult of priests had big plans for a piece of shit like Cain who would kill his own brother. And they said, "You don't have to be a simple farmer anymore. We didn't care about the grain anyway. But since you killed your own brother to impress the cult, you now get to be in charge of a whole city." So the coven of Eden begins to spread out with Cain as their patriarch and builder of this city called Enoch.